The radio crackled with static as the last convoy vehicle disappeared into the amber haze of dawn. Forward Operating Base Sentinel had gone quiet except for the whisper of sand against concrete barriers and the distant rumble of generators. Hindu Kush, Hindu Kush. 12 hours, a critical resupply mission would either save the isolated checkpoint 30 kilometers away, or 400 soldiers would face their worst nightmare without ammunition, medical supplies, or hope. 3 attempts had already failed. The route was compromised. Snipers controlled the high ground, and conventional approaches had proven deadly. Command had officially declared the mission impossible and began discussing evacuation protocols. Every tactical expert, every seasoned marksman, every strategic mind had reached the same conclusion. Everyone except the quiet woman checking inventory sheets in the supply depot. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of copper and gold as Staff Sergeant Emma Rodriguez completed her daily ammunition count. The depot hummed with the methodical sounds of logistics, clipboards scratching against paper, boots shuffling between supply crates, voices calling out serial numbers and quantities. This was her domain, a world of precise inventories and calculated distributions where every bullet, every medical kit, every meal ready to eat was tracked, categorized, and allocated according to regulations that most combat soldiers never bothered to understand. Emma moved through the rows of ammunition with practiced efficiency, her small frame navigating between towering stacks of supply containers. At 28, she had spent 6 years perfecting the art of making sure others had what they needed to survive. Her desert combat uniform bore the patches of someone who kept the machine running rather than someone who pulled triggers. No combat infantry badge decorated her chest. No sniper school graduation pin caught the light. Just the simple designation that marked her as essential, but unremarkable in the hierarchy of warfare. Captain Michael Davis stood outside the tactical operations center, his jaw clenched as he studied satellite imagery on a tablet that told the same story every reconnaissance update had delivered for the past week. The narrow valley leading to Checkpoint Bravo stretched across his screen like a funnel of death, with elevated positions on both sides offering perfect fields of fire for anyone wanting to stop a convoy. 3 vehicle columns had tried to push through in the past 4 days. 2 had been turned back by accurate sniper fire. 1 had lost a truck and 3 soldiers to a precisely placed shot that disabled their lead vehicle at the worst possible choke point. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Checkpoint Bravo needed resupply within 18 hours, or the garrison would be forced to abandon their strategic position. Losing that checkpoint would compromise supply lines for the entire region and potentially cost dozens of lives in the evacuation. But every route analysis, every tactical assessment, every operational possibility had been exhausted. The enemy held the high ground, possessed clear sight lines, and had demonstrated both the patience and skill to wait for perfect opportunities. Staff Sergeant Jake Thompson emerged from the operations center, his equipment harness loaded with the tools of a reconnaissance specialist. Behind him, Corporal Tyler Brooks adjusted the straps on a heavy spotting scope case, his young face already showing the weathered look of someone who spent his days studying distant threats through magnified optics. They had been tasked with one final assessment of the route, a last attempt to find some angle, some possibility that previous teams had missed. Thompson paused near the supply depot, his eyes scanning the organized chaos of logistics operations. With the detached interest of someone whose world revolved around different priorities. Emma Rodriguez looked up from her clipboard as the 2 men passed, offering a brief nod that acknowledged their presence without suggesting any deeper connection. In the rigid social structure of military operations, reconnaissance specialists and supply personnel occupied different spheres, their paths crossing only when ammunition needed to be requisitioned or equipment required replacement. The morning briefing had lasted exactly 43 minutes, during which Captain Davis outlined the impossible parameters of their situation with the clinical precision of someone who had already accepted failure. The enemy sniper position commanded a view of the entire valley approach to Checkpoint Bravo. Previous reconnaissance had identified the location approximately 1,600 meters from the nearest possible friendly firing position, well beyond the effective range of standard infantry weapons and at the extreme edge of what even specialized sniper systems could attempt under perfect conditions. Weather conditions were far from perfect. The seasonal winds that swept through the Hindu Kush carried fine sand that created shifting visibility problems, and temperature variations between the cool morning air and rapidly heating ground produced thermal distortions that made long-range accuracy nearly impossible. Professional marksmen with years of specialized training had studied the shot and declared it unfeasible given the environmental factors and distance involved. Emma had listened to the briefing from the back of the room, her presence barely acknowledged by the collection of combat specialists who focused on tactical solutions that involved weapons and movement rather than supply calculations and inventory management. She held her own clipboard, filled with data about ammunition expenditure rates and projected consumption patterns that would become irrelevant if the checkpoint fell. Her handwriting covered the pages in neat columns, tracking resources with the same attention to detail that snipers applied to range cards and wind calculations. When the briefing concluded, the combat personnel dispersed to prepare for missions that might salvage something from an impossible situation. Emma returned to her depot, where the steady rhythm of logistics continued regardless of tactical complications. Supplies still needed to be processed, inventory still required updating, and the basic machinery of military operations still demanded her attention even as strategic plans crumbled around operational realities. The depot contained more than most people realized. Beyond the obvious stacks of ammunition and medical supplies, Emma maintained specialized equipment that crossed the boundary between logistics and tactical support. Precision instruments for calculating ballistic trajectories sat beside inventory. Computers, advanced optics used for long-range reconnaissance of supply routes occupied storage areas near communications equipment. The boundary between support and combat operations blurred in the carefully organized spaces where Emma spent her days. Her personal equipment locker contained items that would have surprised the reconnaissance specialists who dismissed her as purely administrative support. A custom rifle that she had assembled from carefully selected components during her previous deployment occupied a locked case that bore no external markings suggesting its contents. Range-finding equipment that exceeded standard infantry specifications lay beside logbooks filled with detailed environmental data collected during months of supply route reconnaissance. Emma had been conducting her own assessment of the tactical situation, not from the perspective of someone planning an assault, but from the viewpoint of someone who understood that successful operations depended on having the right resources in the right place at the right time. Her analysis incorporated factors that tactical specialists overlooked, variables that affected accuracy and timing in ways that traditional military training rarely addressed. The enemy sniper position that dominated the valley approach had been active for 6 days, demonstrating consistent accuracy and tactical patience that suggested professional training and superior equipment. But Emma had noticed patterns in the timing of enemy fire, environmental factors that influenced when shots were taken and when positions remained silent. Her logistical perspective provided insights into how enemy operations were sustained, what resources they required, and when vulnerabilities might emerge in their defensive posture. Sergeant First Class Jake Thompson prepared his equipment with the methodical care of someone whose survival depended on attention to detail. His spotting scope was calibrated for the specific atmospheric conditions expected in the target area, and his range-finding equipment had been zeroed against known distances to ensure accuracy in an environment where miscalculation meant death. Tyler Brooks assisted with equipment checks, his role as spotter requiring him to master technical skills that complemented Thompson's tactical expertise. Their mission parameters were clear but offered little hope for success. They would establish an observation position on Ridgeline Alpha 7, study the enemy sniper location across Wadi Karim, and determine whether any tactical solution existed that previous teams had missed. The distance involved exceeded the reliable range of their equipment, and environmental conditions would challenge even perfect shots under optimal circumstances. Emma watched their departure from the depot entrance, her expression thoughtful as she considered variables that their tactical training might not have addressed. The route to Ridgeline Alpha 7 would take them past supply cache locations that she had established during previous reconnaissance missions. Those caches contained equipment and resources that might prove relevant to their assessment, but communication protocols between reconnaissance and logistics personnel rarely included such detailed coordination. The supply depot returned to its normal rhythm as the tactical teams departed for their assignments. Emma continued her inventory work, but her attention remained divided between immediate administrative requirements and longer-term considerations about resource allocation in an evolving tactical situation. Her logbooks contained information that might prove relevant to the reconnaissance mission, data about environmental conditions and timing patterns that she had collected during months of supply route operations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the morning progressed and tactical teams moved toward their assigned positions, Emma made a decision that would transform her role from administrative support to something far more significant. She secured her immediate responsibilities, ensured that depot operations would continue in her absence, and began preparing equipment that most people assumed she didn't possess. Her personal rifle case emerged from its locked storage, along with precision optics and range-finding equipment that exceeded standard logistics specifications. The transformation was subtle but complete. Emma Rodriguez was preparing to demonstrate that the boundary between support and combat operations existed primarily in the assumptions that others made about capability and training. Her years of logistical experience had provided opportunities to develop skills that traditional military categorization didn't acknowledge, and the impossible tactical situation had created conditions where those skills might prove decisive. The sun climbed higher above the Hindu Kush peaks as Forward Operating Base Sentinel prepared for what might be its final attempt to solve an impossible problem. Reconnaissance teams moved toward positions that offered clear views of failure. Tactical specialists prepared for missions that contradicted their own assessments, and administrative personnel continued the routine work that sustained military operations, regardless of strategic outcomes. Only Emma Rodriguez was preparing to attempt something that no one had asked her to do, using capabilities that no one knew she possessed, to solve a problem that everyone else had already declared unsolvable. Emma Rodriguez had arrived at Forward Operating Base Sentinel 8 months earlier with orders that placed her squarely in the administrative machinery of military logistics. Her personnel file contained the standard qualifications expected of a supply specialist: certification in inventory management systems, training in hazardous materials handling, and completion of the basic logistics officer course that prepared soldiers to track resources rather than eliminate threats. Nothing in her official record suggested capabilities beyond the essential but unremarkable work of keeping combat units supplied with the materials they needed to function. The assignment suited the assumptions that others made about her background and abilities. Emma was soft-spoken during briefings, methodical in her approach to problems, and demonstrated the kind of reliable competence that kept operations running smoothly without drawing attention to itself. She processed requisition forms with efficiency, managed supply inventories with precision, and maintained the detailed records that allowed commanders to make informed decisions about resource allocation. Her work was essential but invisible, the kind of contribution that military operations depended upon, but rarely celebrated. Her living quarters reflected the modest expectations that came with her assigned role. A small room in the logistics section of the base, furnished with standard military issue furniture and personal items that suggested someone focused on practical concerns rather than tactical sophistication. Photographs of family back home occupied space beside technical manuals about supply chain management and inventory control procedures. Books on logistics theory sat next to regulations governing the proper handling of ammunition and medical supplies. The other personnel at Forward Operating Base Sentinel had quickly categorized Emma according to their understanding of military hierarchies and specializations. Combat soldiers viewed her as someone who processed their equipment requests, but couldn't be expected to understand the tactical applications of what she distributed. Intelligence specialists saw her as a reliable source of information about supply movements, but not someone whose insights might contribute to operational planning. Even other logistics personnel often treated her as competent but unremarkable, someone who executed assigned tasks without demonstrating particular innovation or initiative. This perception had been reinforced by Emma's behavior during her first months at the base. She had focused on learning the specific requirements of her assigned duties, establishing efficient systems for managing the constant flow of supplies that sustained base operations, and building the kind of professional relationships that allowed her to anticipate needs before formal requests were submitted. Her questions during briefings focused on practical matters of timing and quantity rather than tactical applications or strategic implications. Captain Michael Davis had interacted with Emma primarily through the routine administrative processes that govern supply allocation and inventory management. Their conversations had been professional but limited, focused on the specific requirements of various units and the logistical challenges of maintaining adequate supplies in a remote location. Davis had formed an impression of Emma as competent and reliable within her designated sphere of responsibility, but he had never considered whether her capabilities might extend beyond the boundaries of traditional logistics work. The same pattern had characterized Emma's interactions with the reconnaissance and combat specialists who formed the tactical core of base operations. Sergeant First Class Jake Thompson had requisitioned equipment through Emma's supply systems, and their exchanges had been efficient but purely functional. Corporal Tyler Brooks had processed ammunition requests that Emma had fulfilled with appropriate speed and accuracy, but their relationship had never progressed beyond the basic requirements of their respective duties. This professional distance had been maintained partly by design and partly by the natural segregation that existed between different military specializations. Combat personnel and logistics personnel occupied different social spheres within the base community, their paths crossing primarily when operational requirements demanded coordination between their distinct areas of expertise. Emma had done nothing to challenge these boundaries, accepting her role within the established hierarchy without seeking recognition or advancement beyond her assigned responsibilities. Her daily routine had reinforced these perceptions through its focus on the detailed work that sustained base operations behind the scenes. Emma arrived at the supply depot each morning before most combat personnel had completed their physical training, beginning her day with inventory checks and equipment maintenance that ensured readiness for whatever operational requirements might emerge. She processed requisition forms, coordinated deliveries, and maintained the complex tracking systems that allowed commanders to understand what resources were available and where they were located. The work required skills that most people underestimated in their complexity and importance. Effective logistics demanded an understanding of tactical operations sufficient to anticipate equipment needs before they became critical, it required technical knowledge about weapon systems, communications equipment, and medical supplies that often exceeded the expertise of the soldiers who used these resources. Most importantly, it demanded the ability to think systematically about complex operations and identify potential points of failure before they compromised mission success. Emma had demonstrated all of these capabilities during her time at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, but always within the context of her assigned logistics role. Her recommendations about supply allocation had proven consistently accurate. Her timing in delivering critical resources had been precisely calibrated to operational requirements, and her maintenance of equipment inventories had prevented several potential shortages that could have compromised mission readiness. Yet these contributions had been viewed as evidence of competent administrative work rather than indicators of broader tactical understanding. The isolation of Emma's role had been reinforced by the physical separation between logistics operations and tactical planning activities. The supply depot occupied a section of the base that was functionally connected to but socially distinct from the areas where combat operations were planned and coordinated. Emma spent her days in an environment focused on practical concerns about quantities, delivery schedules, and inventory management rather than discussions of tactical doctrine or operational strategy. This separation had created opportunities for Emma to develop capabilities that remained invisible to her colleagues. The requirements of managing supplies for specialized operations had necessitated detailed understanding of equipment, specifications, and performance characteristics that overlapped significantly with tactical applications. Coordinating deliveries to remote locations had required familiarity with terrain analysis and route planning that paralleled the skills used in reconnaissance operations. Most importantly, maintaining readiness for unpredictable operational requirements had demanded the ability to think strategically about complex problems and develop solutions under pressure. Emma had pursued additional training and education that extended beyond the formal requirements of her logistics role, but she had done so privately and without drawing attention to these efforts. Technical courses in ballistics and optics had been justified as relevant to understanding the equipment she was responsible for distributing. Training in terrain analysis and route planning had been presented as necessary for coordinating supply deliveries to forward positions. Even specialized courses in marksmanship and precision shooting had been explained as relevant to her responsibilities for testing and maintaining weapons systems before distribution. These additional qualifications had remained largely unknown to her colleagues because Emma had never found appropriate opportunities to demonstrate their relevance to her assigned duties. The military's emphasis on specialization and clearly defined roles had created few contexts where logistics personnel were expected to contribute tactical expertise or operational insights. Emma had accumulated knowledge and skills that might prove valuable in tactical situations, but the organizational structure of military operations had provided no mechanism for recognizing or utilizing these capabilities. The result had been a situation where Emma possessed significantly more tactical knowledge and operational capability than anyone at Forward Operating Base Sentinel realized, but where she continued to be perceived and treated according to the narrow expectations associated with her official logistics assignment. This disconnect between perception and reality had created a form of professional invisibility that would prove significant when tactical specialists encountered problems that required unconventional solutions. Her colleagues' assumptions about her capabilities had been reinforced by Emma's own behavior, which had consistently emphasized competence within her assigned role rather than ambition to expand beyond traditional boundaries. She had never volunteered tactical opinions during operational briefings, never requested assignment to reconnaissance missions, and never suggested that her expertise might be relevant to combat operations. This restraint had been interpreted as appropriate professional humility rather than strategic discretion about revealing capabilities that might not be welcomed or understood. The broader military culture at Forward Operating Base Sentinel had supported these perceptions through its emphasis on specialization and hierarchical clarity. Combat operations were the responsibility of trained infantry and reconnaissance specialists. Intelligence analysis was conducted by personnel with appropriate security clearances and analytical training, and logistics support was provided by qualified supply specialists who understood administrative requirements. This division of labor had proven effective for routine operations, but it had also created blind spots where unconventional problems might require solutions that crossed traditional boundaries between specializations. Emma had observed these cultural patterns during her months at the base, noting how assumptions about capability and authority were reinforced through daily interactions and organizational procedures. She had seen how personnel outside designated combat roles were systematically excluded from tactical discussions, how expertise in one area was rarely considered relevant to challenges in other areas, and how innovative solutions were often overlooked when they originated from unexpected sources. This understanding had influenced Emma's approach to her own professional development and preparation. Rather than challenging existing perceptions directly, she had focused on quietly developing capabilities that might prove valuable when circumstances created opportunities for contribution beyond her assigned role. She had prepared for possibilities that others hadn't considered, accumulated resources that others didn't know existed, and developed expertise that others didn't expect her to possess. The morning briefing about the impossible tactical situation facing Checkpoint Bravo had represented exactly the kind of circumstance that Emma had been preparing for, though she had not anticipated the specific parameters of the challenge. The failure of conventional tactical approaches had created a situation where traditional assumptions about capability and authority might prove inadequate, where solutions might emerge from unexpected sources, and where expertise that had been overlooked might suddenly become relevant. Emma had recognized this opportunity immediately, though she had also understood that acting upon it would require careful consideration of timing, approach, and potential consequences. Her colleagues' perceptions of her capabilities would need to be managed strategically, her preparation would need to be revealed gradually, and her contributions would need to be demonstrated rather than simply asserted. The challenge was not just tactical, but also social and organizational, requiring navigation of military hierarchies and cultural expectations that had not been designed to accommodate the kind of unconventional solution that the situation might require. The dismissal had begun subtly during Emma's first weeks at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, manifesting through small interactions that gradually established her position within the informal hierarchy that governed daily life at the installation. During her initial briefings with various unit commanders, Emma had attempted to contribute observations about supply route security based on her previous deployment experience, only to have these comments politely acknowledged and then ignored. When tactical decisions were actually made, her suggestions about optimizing ammunition distribution to account for varying consumption rates during different types of operations had been received with the kind of patient attention that superiors showed to well-meaning subordinates whose expertise was assumed to be limited to their designated specialization. Captain Michael Davis had established the tone for these interactions during Emma's first month when she had identified potential vulnerabilities in the base's supply chain that could be exploited by enemy forces seeking to disrupt operations. Her analysis had incorporated tactical considerations about likely enemy objectives and capabilities, but Davis had responded by thanking her for her administrative perspective and referring the matter to intelligence specialists who were presumably better qualified to assess tactical implications. The intelligence analysts had eventually reached similar conclusions to Emma's original assessment, but her contribution had been forgotten by the time their formal report was circulated to command personnel. This pattern had been reinforced through countless subsequent interactions where Emma's insights were systematically categorized as administrative input rather than tactical analysis, regardless of their actual content or accuracy. When she had suggested modifications to equipment loadouts based on her observation of usage patterns during combat operations, the recommendations had been forwarded to weapons specialists who ultimately implemented similar changes without acknowledging the source of the original suggestion. Her analysis of enemy timing patterns, derived from careful observation of when supply convoys were attacked and when they passed without incident, had been dismissed as anecdotal rather than being incorporated into operational planning. The social dynamics of the base had reinforced these professional dismissals through informal interactions that consistently positioned Emma as someone whose perspective was valued within narrow boundaries, but whose expertise was not considered relevant to broader operational concerns. During meals in the dining facility, conversations about tactical operations would continue around Emma, but rarely include her directly, even when the topics involved logistical considerations that were central to her daily responsibilities. When combat personnel discussed equipment performance or operational challenges, they would often redirect questions about supply-related issues to Emma, while simultaneously making it clear that her input on tactical applications was not expected or desired. Sergeant First Class Jake Thompson had embodied this attitude during numerous interactions where his requests for specialized equipment had led to detailed discussions about technical specifications and performance characteristics. Emma's knowledge of ballistics, optics, and precision shooting systems had become apparent during these conversations, but Thompson had consistently interpreted this expertise as evidence of administrative thoroughness rather than tactical competence. When Emma had demonstrated familiarity with advanced sniper systems that exceeded what most logistics personnel would be expected to know, Thompson had commented approvingly on her dedication to understanding the equipment she was responsible for distributing, without considering that her knowledge might indicate actual experience with tactical applications. The pattern had extended to formal training exercises and readiness assessments where Emma's participation had been limited to administrative support roles, despite her qualifications for more substantive involvement. During marksmanship exercises, she had been assigned to manage ammunition distribution and target scoring rather than participating as a shooter, even though her performance during mandatory qualification tests had consistently exceeded the scores achieved by many combat personnel. When reconnaissance training had been conducted, Emma had been responsible for coordinating supply support for the exercise rather than participating in the tactical activities, despite her extensive knowledge of terrain analysis and route planning. These limitations had been justified through appeals to organizational efficiency and appropriate specialization rather than explicit statements about Emma's capabilities, but the effect had been to systematically exclude her from activities that might have revealed her actual level of tactical knowledge and operational experience. The assumption that logistics personnel were primarily administrative specialists had created a form of professional segregation that prevented recognition of capabilities that extended beyond traditional role boundaries. Corporal Tyler Brooks had contributed to this pattern through interactions that consistently positioned Emma as a source of administrative support rather than tactical expertise, even when her contributions demonstrated knowledge that exceeded his own in relevant areas. During equipment briefings where Emma had provided detailed technical information about advanced optics systems, Brooks had focused on the practical implications for his own duties, rather than recognizing the depth of understanding that her explanations revealed. When she had offered insights about environmental factors that affected long-range shooting accuracy, he had treated these observations as useful administrative details, rather than evidence of practical experience with precision marksmanship. The dismissal had been particularly evident during crisis situations where conventional approaches had proven inadequate and alternative perspectives might have been valuable. When supply convoys had encountered unexpected tactical challenges, Emma's suggestions about route modifications and timing. Adjustments had been considered only after traditional solutions had failed, and even then, her contributions had been implemented without acknowledgement of their tactical sophistication. Her ability to analyze complex operational problems and develop innovative solutions had been consistently undervalued because it originated from someone whose primary role was assumed to be administrative rather than tactical, the base's formal training programs had reinforced these perceptions by restricting access to advanced tactical courses based on military occupational specialty rather than individual capability or interest. Emma had been excluded from sniper training, advanced reconnaissance courses, and specialized tactical programs that she was arguably better qualified to attend than many of the personnel who were automatically included based on their assigned roles. When she had requested permission to attend voluntary training sessions that were open to all personnel, her participation had often been limited to observer status or administrative support functions. Communication protocols had further embedded these dismissive patterns by establishing formal channels that filtered Emma's input through administrative hierarchies rather than allowing direct contribution to tactical discussions. Her observations about enemy patterns and operational vulnerabilities had been required to follow supply chain reporting procedures that ensured they would be categorized as logistics intelligence rather than tactical analysis, regardless of their actual content or implications. By the time her insights reached decision-makers, they had been processed through multiple layers of administrative review that often obscured their tactical significance. The cumulative effect of these patterns had been to create a professional environment where Emma's actual capabilities remained largely invisible to her colleagues, not because she had concealed them, but because the organizational structure of military operations had systematically prevented their recognition and utilization. Her extensive tactical knowledge had been acknowledged only within the narrow context of administrative competence. Her operational experience had been valued only insofar as it contributed to supply management efficiency, and her analytical abilities had been appreciated only when they supported conventional approaches to logistics challenges. This professional invisibility had extended to social interactions where Emma's colleagues had formed personal relationships based on their assumptions about her background and interests rather than more comprehensive understanding of her experiences and capabilities. Conversations about combat operations and tactical challenges had excluded Emma not from deliberate hostility, but from genuine belief that such topics were outside her area of expertise and interest. Invitations to participate in advanced training, exercises, and professional development opportunities had been extended to personnel whose assigned roles were considered more relevant, regardless of individual qualifications or motivation. The pattern had become so established that even Emma's direct supervisors had internalized assumptions about her, limitations that prevented them from recognizing opportunities where her capabilities might be utilized more effectively. Requests for assignment to more challenging duties had been interpreted as evidence of professional ambition rather than indications that her current role was underutilizing her actual qualifications. Suggestions about improving coordination between logistics and tactical operations had been viewed as attempts to expand administrative authority rather than opportunities to enhance operational effectiveness through better integration of relevant expertise. The psychological impact of this sustained dismissal had been carefully managed by Emma through professional discipline and long-term strategic thinking, but it had nonetheless created challenges that extended beyond immediate operational concerns. The constant need to have her expertise filtered through other personnel before it could be considered credible had required patience and humility that sometimes conflicted with the urgency of tactical situations. The systematic exclusion from advanced training and development opportunities had necessitated private initiative to maintain and expand capabilities that were not being recognized or supported through official channels. Most significantly, The pattern of dismissal had created a situation where Emma's potential contributions to solving critical operational challenges remained unknown to the personnel who were responsible for developing solutions. Her colleagues' assumptions about her limitations had effectively removed her from consideration when conventional approaches proved inadequate and alternative perspectives might have provided valuable insights. The organizational barriers that prevented recognition of her capabilities had also prevented utilization of resources that might prove essential when traditional tactical approaches encountered problems that required unconventional solutions. The tactical situation surrounding Checkpoint Bravo had deteriorated with mathematical precision over the preceding week. Each failed attempt to establish supply lines, creating cascading consequences that transformed an isolated logistics challenge into a strategic crisis with implications extending far beyond the immediate operational area. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces had not simply identified a vulnerable position to exploit, but had deliberately orchestrated a complex operation designed to demonstrate the inability of coalition forces to maintain control over critical terrain and supply routes that formed the foundation of regional security operations. Captain Michael Davis had spent the previous 48 hours reviewing satellite imagery and tactical assessments that painted an increasingly dire picture of both immediate and long-term consequences. Checkpoint Bravo occupied terrain that controlled access to 3 separate valley systems, making it essential for monitoring enemy movement between Pakistan and Afghanistan and providing early warning for potential attacks against larger installations throughout the region. The loss of this position would create a surveillance gap that could be exploited by hostile forces seeking to establish supply lines for weapons and personnel moving between established safe areas and operational targets. The garrison at Checkpoint Bravo consisted of 412 soldiers from multiple units who had been positioned to conduct counterinsurgency operations and provide security for civilian reconstruction projects in surrounding villages. Their mission had expanded over time to include training Afghan security forces, coordinating humanitarian assistance programs, and conducting reconnaissance operations that supported broader strategic objectives. The complexity of their responsibilities had created supply requirements that exceeded what could be sustained through aerial resupply alone, making ground convoy access essential for maintaining operational capability. Medical supplies represented the most critical immediate concern, with current stocks projected to be exhausted within 36 hours if normal consumption rates continued. The checkpoint's medical facility served not only military personnel, but also provided emergency care for civilian casualties from throughout the surrounding area, making it a crucial component of efforts to maintain local population support. For coalition operations, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the senior medical officer, had reported that continuing operations without resupply would require implementing triage protocols that could result in preventable deaths among both military and civilian patients. Ammunition stocks presented equally urgent challenges, with current inventory levels insufficient to sustain defensive operations for more than 72 hours if the checkpoint came under sustained attack. The position's defensive preparations had been designed around the assumption that adequate resupply would be available to replace ammunition expended during normal security operations, but the extended isolation had depleted reserves that were essential for maintaining effective defensive capability. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, the senior weapons instructor, had calculated that even routine patrol activities would exhaust critical ammunition categories within the week if supply deliveries could not be restored. Communications equipment failures had compounded these logistical challenges by limiting the checkpoint's ability to coordinate with higher headquarters and request priority resupply for the most critical shortages. Solar panels that powered backup communication systems had been damaged during recent mortar attacks, and replacement components were among the supplies that could not be delivered through aerial methods due to weight and size limitations. Communications breakdown had also prevented effective coordination of air support operations that might have suppressed enemy sniper positions enough to allow convoy movement. The strategic implications extended beyond the immediate tactical situation to encompass broader questions about coalition, credibility, and the sustainability of counterinsurgency operations throughout the region. Regional tribal leaders who had committed to supporting coalition objectives were closely monitoring the situation at Checkpoint Bravo as an indicator of long-term coalition commitment and capability. Failure to maintain the position would likely result in withdrawal of local support that had taken years to develop and could not be easily replaced through military action alone. Intelligence analysts had identified the enemy sniper operation as part of a coordinated campaign designed to demonstrate coalition vulnerabilities and encourage local populations to reconsider their support for government and international forces. The precision and persistence of the sniper attacks had already generated significant local attention, with enemy propaganda efforts emphasizing the inability of superior coalition technology and training to overcome determined resistance. Successful enemy interdiction of supply routes was being portrayed as evidence that coalition forces could not provide security for their own operations, much less protect civilian populations who cooperated with government authorities. Economic consequences were already beginning to manifest in surrounding communities where local businesses had depended on contracts for providing services and supplies to coalition forces. The extended isolation of Checkpoint Bravo had disrupted payment schedules and supply relationships that supported hundreds of civilian jobs and provided crucial income for families throughout the region. Village elders had begun expressing concern about the economic impact of reduced coalition operations, creating pressure for rapid resolution of the tactical crisis that was affecting civilian welfare as well as military objectives. The psychological impact on personnel at Checkpoint Bravo had become increasingly significant as the isolation continued and resupply attempts failed. Morale reports indicated growing concern about abandonment by higher headquarters, particularly among soldiers who had been deployed for extended periods and were approaching scheduled rotation dates. The stress of maintaining combat readiness while managing critical shortages had begun affecting unit cohesion and individual performance in ways that could compromise defensive capability, even if adequate supplies were eventually restored. Evacuation planning had reached advanced stages as commanders prepared for the possibility that ground resupply could not be restored within the time frame required to maintain operational viability. Helicopter assets were being positioned for potential evacuation operations, but the tactical situation that prevented supply convoys also complicated air operations by providing enemy forces with opportunities to engage aircraft during vulnerable approach and departure phases. Weather conditions in the mountain valleys further limited the timing and frequency of air operations, creating narrow windows that enemy forces could predict and prepare to exploit. The failure of 3 previous convoy attempts had eliminated several potential tactical approaches and provided enemy forces with detailed intelligence about coalition capabilities and operational methods. Each failed mission had revealed information about equipment specifications, tactical procedures, and communication protocols that could be used to counter future attempts. The enemy sniper position had proven capable of engaging targets at ranges that exceeded the defensive capability of standard convoy security procedures, forcing reconsideration of fundamental assumptions about tactical parameters for supply operations. Regional commanders had begun discussing the broader implications of potentially losing Checkpoint Bravo for ongoing operations throughout eastern Afghanistan. The position served as a crucial link in supply chains that supported multiple forward operating bases and smaller outposts, making its loss potentially catastrophic for maintaining security operations across several provinces. Alternative routes for supporting these positions would require significant additional resources and would create new vulnerabilities that enemy forces could exploit to further disrupt coalition operations. Political pressures were intensifying. As news of the tactical crisis reached higher levels of command and began attracting attention from civilian leadership, responsible for strategic oversight of military operations, congressional committees and international coalition partners were beginning to ask questions about operational planning and resource allocation that had allowed a critical position to become isolated and potentially untenable. The failure to resolve the immediate tactical crisis was generating broader questions about strategic competence and operational sustainability that could affect future support for military operations throughout the region. Time constraints were becoming increasingly critical as each passing hour reduced the range of viable options for resolving the crisis. Weather forecasts indicated that seasonal storms would likely prevent aerial operations within the next 72 hours, creating a narrow window during which any solution would need to be implemented. The compressed timeline eliminated several potential approaches that might have been viable under different circumstances, forcing consideration of tactical options that would normally be rejected as excessively risky or inadequately planned. The Tactical Operations Center had emptied gradually as personnel departed to implement various aspects of contingency planning that acknowledged the increasing likelihood of failure to resolve the supply crisis through conventional military means. Captain Michael Davis remained at the Central Command Station, methodically reviewing satellite imagery and intelligence reports that confirmed what every tactical assessment had already established. No viable solution existed within the parameters of standard military doctrine and available resources for neutralizing the enemy sniper position that dominated all approaches to Checkpoint Bravo. Sergeant First Class Jake Thompson had collected his reconnaissance equipment with the resigned efficiency of someone preparing for a mission that would likely confirm existing assessments rather than identify new possibilities. His orders were specific but offered little hope for success. Establish observation position on ridgeline Alpha 7, conduct detailed surveillance of enemy positions across Wadi Karim, and determine whether any tactical opportunity existed that previous reconnaissance teams had failed to identify. The mathematical realities of distance, environmental conditions, and enemy capability suggested that his mission would conclude with another negative assessment that brought the crisis no closer to resolution. Corporal Tyler Brooks had assisted with equipment preparation while privately acknowledging that their assigned task bordered on futile gesture rather than meaningful tactical operation. The enemy sniper position commanded comprehensive observation and fire control over the entire valley approach to Checkpoint Bravo from a location that exceeded the effective range of standard coalition weapon systems. Weather conditions that included shifting winds and thermal distortion created additional challenges that made precision shooting nearly impossible even under optimal circumstances with perfect equipment and unlimited preparation time. The briefing room had gradually emptied as various specialists departed to pursue their assigned responsibilities in what had become an increasingly desperate search for alternatives to evacuation planning. Intelligence analysts had returned to their workstations to review enemy capability assessments and develop recommendations for minimizing casualties during potential withdrawal operations. Communications specialists had focused on coordinating with air assets that might provide limited support for evacuation activities despite the tactical risks created by enemy positions that could engage aircraft during approach and departure phases. Medical personnel had begun preparing for potential mass casualty events that could result from either evacuation operations conducted under enemy fire or continued isolation that would eventually exhaust critical medical supplies and compromise their ability to provide adequate care for routine injuries and illnesses. Transportation coordinators had focused on identifying helicopter assets and developing flight schedules that could minimize exposure time while maximizing the number of personnel who could be evacuated during each mission. Emma Rodriguez had remained in the briefing room after others had departed, ostensibly reviewing supply inventory reports that would need to be updated, regardless of how the tactical crisis was ultimately resolved. Her presence had gone largely unnoticed as commanders and specialists focused on their respective areas of responsibility, but she had continued listening to radio communications and monitoring tactical displays that provided real-time information about ongoing reconnaissance efforts and enemy activity patterns. The isolation of the briefing room had provided Emma with an opportunity to study the tactical situation without the social constraints that normally limited her participation in operational planning discussions. Satellite imagery displayed on large monitors showed the enemy sniper position with remarkable clarity, revealing details about terrain features, concealment methods, and fields of fire that confirmed the sophistication of enemy tactical preparation. The position had been selected and prepared by personnel with advanced training and extensive experience in long-range precision shooting. Emma's analysis of the tactical displays had incorporated perspectives and considerations that differed significantly from the assessments conducted by traditional reconnaissance specialists. Her logistical background had provided insights into enemy supply requirements and operational sustainability that suggested vulnerabilities in timing and positioning that purely tactical analysis might overlook. Her extensive personal study of ballistics and precision shooting had revealed environmental factors and technical considerations that could potentially be exploited by someone with appropriate equipment and sufficient skill. The range calculations displayed on tactical screens showed the enemy position at approximately 1,600 meters from the nearest coalition firing position on Ridgeline Alpha 7, placing the shot at the extreme edge of what specialized sniper systems could attempt under perfect conditions. Environmental data indicated wind speeds that varied between 8 and 12 miles per hour with shifting directions, temperature differentials that created unpredictable thermal effects, and atmospheric conditions that would challenge even the most sophisticated ballistic computers and range-finding equipment. Emma had been conducting her own calculations based on data that she had collected during months of supply convoy reconnaissance and route analysis. Her personal observations of environmental patterns in the specific geographic area provided insights into wind behavior and thermal effects that were not captured in standard meteorological reports. Her detailed knowledge of ballistic performance, characteristics for various ammunition types and rifle systems, suggested possibilities that might exist beyond the capabilities of standard military equipment, but within the range of specialized gear that she had quietly acquired and maintained. The decision that Emma faced involved considerations that extended far beyond immediate tactical requirements to encompass questions about military hierarchy, organizational protocols, and personal responsibility that could have long-term consequences for her career and professional relationships. Attempting to contribute tactical expertise that was not officially recognized or requested could be interpreted as insubordination or inappropriate assumption of responsibilities outside her designated role. Failure to act on knowledge and capabilities that might prevent a strategic disaster could represent a different kind of failure with potentially more serious moral implications. Her colleague's departure from the briefing room had created a temporary window during which Emma could prepare for possibilities that others had not considered without immediately confronting the social and organizational challenges that would inevitably arise if she decided to act outside the boundaries of her assigned responsibilities. The Tactical Operations Center would remain minimally staffed during reconnaissance operations, providing potential opportunities for accessing equipment and information that might be relevant to unconventional approaches to the tactical crisis. Emma's personal equipment locker contained specialized gear that most personnel at Forward Operating Base Sentinel did not know existed, including precision rifle systems and advanced optics that exceeded the capabilities of standard military equipment. Her private training and preparation had focused on developing skills that might prove valuable in situations where conventional approaches had proven inadequate, but she had never anticipated circumstances where those capabilities might be directly relevant to ongoing military operations. The communications equipment in the Tactical Operations Center provided access to real-time intelligence about enemy positions and coalition reconnaissance activities that could be crucial for timing and coordination of any unconventional tactical approach. Weather monitoring systems offered detailed information about environmental conditions that affected long-range shooting accuracy, including wind patterns and atmospheric data that were updated continuously throughout the day. Navigation systems provided precise coordinates and range calculations that could support ballistic computations for extreme distance shooting. Emma had spent months studying the specific terrain features and environmental conditions around Forward Operating Base Sentinel through her legitimate responsibilities for coordinating supply convoy security and route planning. This knowledge had provided her with insights into tactical opportunities and challenges that were not available to personnel whose experience was limited to shorter-term assignments or more specialized roles. Her understanding of local conditions included factors that could be crucial for long-range precision shooting, but might not be apparent to reconnaissance specialists who were focused primarily on standard tactical procedures. The choice that confronted Emma involved weighing potential benefits against certain costs in a situation where traditional risk assessment procedures provided little guidance for evaluating unconventional approaches to tactical problems. Success could potentially save hundreds of lives and prevent a strategic disaster that would have implications extending far beyond the immediate operational area. Failure could result in disciplinary action, career termination, and personal consequences that would follow her throughout any future military service. More immediately, Emma's decision would need to account for the practical challenges of implementing an unauthorized tactical operation using personal equipment and private expertise, while avoiding detection by colleagues who would likely attempt to prevent such activities if they became aware of them. The timing would need to be coordinated with ongoing reconnaissance operations to avoid interference with official missions while maximizing the probability of success for an approach that would have only one opportunity to achieve its objectives. Emma had closed the supply inventory reports and secured the administrative materials that had provided her legitimate reason for remaining in the briefing room after others had departed. Her expression had remained professionally neutral while she considered options that could transform her role from administrative support to tactical operator, but which would require careful planning and precise execution to avoid compromising both immediate objectives and long-term professional viability. The tactical displays continued showing enemy positions and coalition reconnaissance activities while Emma prepared to leave the briefing room and return to her normal duties, but her departure would mark the beginning of preparation for activities that extended far beyond her assigned responsibilities and into areas where her actual capabilities had never been officially recognized or utilized. The moment of choice had arrived, though its resolution would require hours of careful preparation before its implications became apparent to anyone else at Forward Operating Base Sentinel. Emma's personal equipment locker occupied an inconspicuous corner of the logistics storage facility, secured with a standard military issue lock that gave no indication of the specialized contents within. Unlike the clearly marked containers that held administrative supplies and standard issue equipment, this particular storage space contained items that Emma had acquired through years of careful procurement, personal investment, and unofficial CHANNEL that existed parallel to normal military supply systems. The lock opened with a soft click that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet storage area, revealing contents that would have surprised every colleague who assumed her capabilities were limited to inventory management and administrative procedures. The custom rifle system that occupied the center of the locker represented months of research, planning, and careful assembly from components that had been selected for performance, characteristics that exceeded anything available through standard military procurement channels. The receiver had been machined to tolerances that allowed for precision that surpassed factory specifications, while the barrel had been custom manufactured using techniques that optimized accuracy for extreme range. Applications. The trigger system had been adjusted by a specialist, who worked primarily with competitive shooters and law enforcement snipers, creating a mechanism that responded to pressure variations measured in ounces rather than pounds. The optics mounted on the rifle represented technology that was available to civilian precision shooters but rarely found in standard military inventories. The main scope incorporated ballistic computers that could calculate trajectory adjustments for variables including temperature, barometric pressure, wind speed and direction, target angle, and ammunition specifications. Secondary optics included a spotting scope with magnification capabilities that exceeded most equipment available to reconnaissance personnel, along with range-finding devices that could provide accurate distance measurements at ranges that challenged conventional laser systems. Ammunition storage within the locker contained cartridges that had been hand-loaded using components selected for consistency and performance rather than cost-effectiveness or procurement convenience. Each round had been weighed, measured, and tested to ensure ballistic performance that exceeded mass-produced ammunition by margins that could prove crucial when shooting at distances where minor variations in velocity or trajectory could determine success or failure. The cases had been precision-sized and the powder charges measured to tolerances that required equipment and expertise that were normally associated with competitive shooting rather than military logistics. Emma's ballistic reference materials filled several notebooks with data that she had collected during years of personal experimentation and testing under various environmental conditions. Unlike standardized military ballistic tables that provided general guidance for typical scenarios, her records contained specific information about performance, characteristics for her particular rifle and ammunition combination under conditions that ranged from desert heat to mountain cold, from calm air to crosswinds that approached the limits of what precision shooting could accommodate. The data had been accumulated through hundreds of hours of private practice and testing that had occurred during off-duty time and personal leave periods. Weather monitoring equipment within the locker included instruments that provided measurements with accuracy that exceeded standard military meteorological gear. Wind meters capable of detecting direction and velocity changes measured in fractions of miles per hour. Barometric pressure sensors that could identify variations that affected ballistic trajectory, and temperature monitoring devices that track changes significant enough to alter ammunition performance characteristics. The equipment represented Emma's understanding that successful extreme-range shooting depended on environmental data that was far more precise than what was required for routine military operations. Communication gear stored alongside the shooting equipment included radio systems that could monitor multiple frequencies simultaneously, allowing coordination with ongoing operations while maintaining capabilities for independent communication if official channels became unavailable or inappropriate. The radios had been modified with encryption capabilities that exceeded standard equipment and included features that allowed monitoring of reconnaissance communications without interfering with official operations or revealing unauthorized monitoring activities. Navigation and range-finding tools represented another category of specialized equipment that Emma had assembled over time. GPS devices provided coordinate accuracy measured in inches rather than meters, while laser rangefinders could determine distances at ranges that exceeded the capabilities of standard military equipment. Ballistic computers could process environmental data and calculate trajectory solutions that accounted for variables that simpler systems ignored, providing shooting solutions that incorporated factors including Coriolis effect, atmospheric density, variations, and projectile stability considerations that became significant only at extreme ranges. The personal body armor and tactical gear stored in the locker had been selected for operations that might require movement and positioning under hostile conditions while maintaining the stability and comfort required for precision shooting. The equipment was lighter and more flexible than standard military gear while providing protection levels that exceeded basic requirements. Camouflage systems included materials and patterns that were optimized for the specific terrain around forward Operating Base Sentinel, providing concealment capabilities that had been tested and refined through Emma's own reconnaissance activities during off-duty periods. Documentation within the locker included detailed terrain maps that Emma had annotated with information collected during months of systematic observation and analysis. The map showed elevation changes, vegetation patterns, wind channels, and thermal characteristics that affected visibility and ballistic performance in ways that were not apparent from standard military maps or aerial photography. Her annotations included shooting positions that she had identified and evaluated, range calculations for various target areas, and environmental notes that recorded conditions during different seasons and weather patterns. Training records stored alongside the equipment documented Emma's participation in civilian shooting competitions and specialized courses that she had attended during leave periods and personal time. Certificates from precision rifle schools, scores from long-range competitions, and correspondence with shooting instructors revealed a level of formal training that complemented her extensive personal practice and experimentation. The records showed consistent improvement in performance over several years and achievement of expert-level qualifications that were recognized in civilian shooting communities but unknown to her military colleagues. Technical manuals and reference materials covered topics that extended far beyond basic marksmanship to include advanced ballistics, meteorology, terrain analysis, and tactical applications that were relevant to extreme-range precision shooting. The library reflected Emma's systematic approach to mastering every aspect of long-range shooting, from the physics of projectile flight to the psychology of maintaining focus and control under pressure. Many of the publications were used by professional snipers and competitive shooters rather than general military personnel. Maintenance equipment and spare parts indicated Emma's commitment to keeping her gear in perfect working condition regardless of environmental challenges or operational tempo. Cleaning supplies, replacement components, and calibration tools allowed her to maintain equipment performance standards that exceeded what was possible with standard military maintenance procedures. The tools included specialized instruments for adjusting optics, testing ammunition performance, and diagnosing equipment problems that could affect accuracy at extreme ranges. Personal protective equipment included items that were designed for extended operations in hostile environments while maintaining the comfort and mobility required for precision shooting activities. Cold weather gear, hydration systems, and nutrition supplies indicated preparation for operations that might require extended periods in remote locations under challenging conditions. The equipment reflected Emma's understanding that successful precision shooting often required endurance and environmental adaptation that tested physical and mental capabilities as much as technical shooting skills. The organization and storage of equipment within the locker revealed Emma's systematic approach to preparation and her expectation that any operational employment of these capabilities would require rapid deployment and efficient utilization under time constraints. Everything was arranged for quick access and transport, with modular packing systems that could be configured for different mission requirements and environmental conditions. The arrangement showed careful planning for scenarios where preparation time would be limited and operational success would depend on having appropriate equipment immediately available. Emma had spent years assembling and refining this collection of specialized equipment, while maintaining absolute discretion about its existence and her capabilities for employing it effectively. The investment in time, money, and effort had been substantial, requiring sacrifices in other areas of her life and careful management of financial resources that were limited by military pay scales. Her motivation had been partly professional development and partly personal interest, but also reflected her recognition that military operations sometimes required capabilities that were not available through official channels or standard procedures. The equipment represented far more than a collection of high-quality gear. It constituted a complete system for conducting precision shooting operations that could complement or extend beyond standard military capabilities. Emma had tested and refined the system through extensive practice and experimentation, developing proficiency that exceeded what most military personnel achieved even with access to specialized training and institutional support. Her private preparation had created capabilities that were unknown to her colleagues, but potentially crucial for situations where conventional approaches proved inadequate. The secrecy that had surrounded Emma's development of these capabilities reflected both personal discretion and organizational realities that made it difficult for personnel outside designated specialties to receive recognition or utilization for expertise that extended beyond their assigned roles. Rather than seeking official acknowledgement or attempting to transfer to positions where her skills might be formally employed, Emma had chosen to develop her capabilities privately while continuing to perform her assigned duties with the competence and reliability that characterized her approach to all professional responsibilities. Emma's preparation for extreme-range precision shooting had begun 4 years earlier during her previous deployment, when a chance encounter with a civilian contractor who specialized in ballistic consulting had introduced her to technical concepts and training methodologies that extended far beyond standard military marksmanship instruction. The contractor, a former Navy SEAL who now worked with law enforcement agencies and competitive shooters, had been impressed by Emma's analytical approach to equipment problems and her systematic method of troubleshooting technical issues that other personnel had dismissed as unsolvable. The initial conversations had focused on ballistic performance of standard military ammunition and methods for improving accuracy through careful attention to environmental factors and shooting technique. Emma's questions had demonstrated understanding of technical concepts that exceeded what the contractor expected from someone whose primary responsibilities involved logistics rather than tactical operations. Her interest in precision shooting had been evident, but more importantly, her approach to learning had shown the kind of systematic thinking and attention to detail that were essential for mastering complex technical skills. Private instruction had begun with basic concepts of external ballistics and gradually progressed through advanced topics, including atmospheric effects on projectile flight, wind reading techniques, and the mathematics of trajectory calculation under varying environmental conditions. The contractor had provided Emma with reference materials and training exercises that paralleled instruction given to professional snipers and competitive precision shooters, but adapted for someone who would be learning independently without institutional support or formal curriculum structure. Emma's progression through increasingly advanced material had been remarkable for its consistency and thoroughness. Rather than rushing toward practical application, she had insisted on mastering theoretical foundations before moving to more complex topics. Her notebooks had filled with mathematical calculations, ballistic tables, and environmental data that she had collected through systematic observation and measurement. The contractor had commented that her approach to learning resembled that of engineers or scientists more than typical military personnel. Range sessions had been conducted during off-duty hours at civilian facilities that offered opportunities for long-range shooting under controlled conditions. Emma had demonstrated natural aptitude for precision shooting, but more importantly, she had shown the patience and discipline required for systematic skill development through repetitive practice and careful analysis of results. Her shooting logs had recorded every detail of environmental conditions, equipment performance, and personal technique that could affect accuracy, creating databases that allowed her to identify patterns and make improvements based on objective analysis rather than subjective impressions. The transition from recreational shooting to serious preparation for operational applications had occurred gradually as Emma's skills had improved and her understanding of potential military applications had developed. The contractor had introduced her to advanced techniques and equipment that were used by professional snipers, while emphasizing the additional challenges that operational shooting presented compared to controlled range conditions. Emma's preparation had expanded to include physical conditioning, stress management, and tactical considerations that were relevant to employing precision shooting skills under hostile conditions. Equipment selection and modification had become increasingly sophisticated as Emma's knowledge and experience had grown. Rather than purchasing complete systems from single manufacturers, she had learned to select individual components based on performance characteristics and compatibility requirements, creating custom configurations that exceeded the capabilities of standard packages. Her understanding of barrel characteristics, action designs, and optic specifications had reached levels that impressed professional gunsmiths and equipment manufacturers. Ammunition development had become a particular area of expertise as Emma had learned to hand-load cartridges that were optimized for her specific rifle and shooting requirements. The process had required investment in specialized equipment and components that exceeded what most recreational shooters considered worthwhile. But Emma's systematic approach to load development had produced ammunition that delivered accuracy and consistency that could not be achieved with factory cartridges. Her loading notes had recorded thousands of test rounds and incremental adjustments that had resulted in ballistic performance that met professional standards. Weather monitoring and environmental analysis had evolved into sophisticated data collection systems that provided Emma with detailed information about atmospheric conditions and their effects on ballistic performance. She had learned to read subtle environmental indicators that could predict wind changes and thermal effects that were not apparent to less experienced observers. Her ability to correlate weather data with shooting results had allowed her to develop correction factors and prediction methods that exceeded the capabilities of standard military training. Tactical applications had been studied through analysis of military sniping operations and consultation with personnel who had operational experience in precision shooting roles. Emma had learned about concealment techniques, position selection, target identification, and engagement procedures that were relevant to military rather than recreational applications. Her understanding of tactical considerations had been supplemented by study of enemy sniper techniques and countermeasures, providing insights into both offensive and defensive aspects of precision shooting operations. Physical conditioning had been tailored specifically for the requirements of precision shooting under operational conditions. Emma had developed strength and endurance capabilities that supported extended periods in shooting positions, while maintaining the fine motor control required for accurate trigger manipulation and optics adjustment. Her training had included stress inoculation exercises that prepared her for maintaining shooting performance under psychological pressure and time constraints that were typical of operational environments. Mental preparation had focused on developing concentration abilities and stress management techniques that were essential for precision shooting under hostile conditions. Emma had studied sports psychology methods and meditation techniques that were used by competitive shooters and military snipers to maintain focus and emotional control during high-pressure situations. Her practice routines had included scenarios that simulated operational stress and decision-making requirements that extended beyond pure marksmanship skills. Communication and coordination skills had been developed through training exercises that required integration of precision shooting with other military operations. Emma had learned to work with spotters, coordinate with supporting elements, and integrate her activities with broader tactical plans while maintaining the independence and flexibility required for precision shooting operations. Her understanding of military communications and coordination procedures had been enhanced by her logistics background, which provided insights into operational planning and resource management that complemented her tactical training. Documentation and analysis procedures had been refined to support systematic improvement and operational planning under varying conditions. Emma's records had evolved into comprehensive databases that tracked equipment performance, environmental effects, personal technique variations, and tactical considerations across thousands of practice sessions and training exercises. The information had been organized to support rapid retrieval and analysis that could be valuable for operational planning and real-time decision-making. Training partnerships had been established with other precision shooting enthusiasts and professionals who could provide advanced instruction and realistic training scenarios. Emma had participated in competitive events and training courses that provided exposure to different techniques and equipment while testing her skills against established standards. Her performance in civilian shooting competitions had been consistently excellent, earning recognition that validated her technical proficiency and competitive temperament. The investment in time, resources, and effort that Emma had devoted to developing her precision shooting capabilities had been extraordinary by any standard, but particularly remarkable for someone whose military duties provided no official justification or support for such specialized training. Her motivation had been sustained by genuine interest in technical excellence and personal satisfaction from mastering complex skills, but also by recognition that her preparation might eventually prove valuable for operational requirements that could not be anticipated through normal military planning processes. Emma's preparation had reached levels that exceeded what many professional military snipers achieved through institutional training and operational experience. Her systematic approach to skill development, combined with access to superior equipment and unlimited practice time, had produced capabilities that were world-class by civilian standards and exceptional even by military criteria. The depth and sophistication of her preparation had created a resource that was completely unknown to her military colleagues, but potentially decisive for tactical situations that required unconventional solutions. The Tactical Operations Center had achieved the quiet efficiency that characterized overnight shifts when most personnel were either sleeping or engaged in routine maintenance activities that required minimal supervision. Emma moved through the facility with the casual confidence of someone whose presence was expected and unremarkable, carrying administrative materials that provided legitimate justification for accessing areas where operational planning information was displayed on monitors, and communication equipment remained active to support ongoing reconnaissance activities. Her approach to the central command station appeared entirely routine as she updated supply status reports and reviewed inventory data that required regular attention regardless of immediate tactical developments. The administrative work provided opportunities to observe reconnaissance communications and monitor tactical displays without drawing attention to her interest in operational details that extended beyond normal logistics responsibilities. Radio traffic from Sergeant First Class Jake Thompson's team indicated they had reached their assigned observation position and were beginning detailed surveillance of enemy positions across Wadi Karim. Weather monitoring displays showed atmospheric conditions that were approaching optimal parameters for long-range precision shooting, with wind speeds dropping below 8 miles per hour and thermal effects stabilizing as morning temperatures reached equilibrium with the warming ground. Barometric pressure remained steady, and humidity levels were within ranges that minimized atmospheric interference with ballistic trajectories. The environmental window that Emma had been monitoring for weeks was beginning to develop into conditions that could support extreme range shooting if other factors aligned appropriately. Communications intercepts indicated that enemy forces were maintaining normal activity patterns around their sniper position, with routine personnel rotations and security procedures that suggested confidence in their tactical situation and no immediate expectation of effective counteraction by coalition forces. Intelligence reports confirmed that enemy personnel were experienced and well-equipped, but also indicated that their defensive preparations had been optimized for countering conventional tactical approaches rather than unconventional threats that might emerge from unexpected directions or employ non-standard methods. Emma completed her administrative tasks and departed the Tactical Operations Center with the same unremarkable efficiency that had characterized her arrival. But her observations had provided crucial information about timing opportunities and tactical parameters that would be essential for planning any unauthorized precision shooting operation. The intelligence she had gathered through legitimate administrative access exceeded what most personnel outside reconnaissance specialties would normally obtain. But her logistics responsibilities provided justification for broad awareness of operational activities. Her return to the supply depot had been timed to coincide with shift changes and maintenance schedules that would minimize the probability of observation by colleagues who might question unusual equipment movement or preparation. Activities. The depot's physical layout provided areas where specialized gear could be assembled and tested without immediate visibility from normal traffic patterns, while administrative routines continued to provide cover for activities that extended beyond routine logistics operations. Emma's personal equipment locker had been accessed with the same systematic approach that characterized all her professional activities, but the items she selected reflected operational requirements rather than administrative needs. The custom rifle system emerged from storage along with specialized optics, precision ammunition, and environmental monitoring equipment that represented capabilities far exceeding anything available through normal military supply channels. Each component was inspected and tested according to procedures that ensured optimal performance under operational conditions. Assembly and calibration of the rifle system required procedures that Emma had practiced extensively but never performed. Under operational conditions where time constraints and security considerations limited the thoroughness of preparation activities. The process demanded both technical precision and tactical awareness, ensuring that equipment performance met extreme range shooting requirements while avoiding detection by personnel who would likely attempt to prevent unauthorized tactical operations if they became aware of such activities. Communication equipment was configured to monitor ongoing reconnaissance activities while maintaining capabilities for independent operation if official coordination became inappropriate or impossible. Emma's radios were programmed with frequencies that would allow her to track Thompson's team activities without interfering with their operations, while backup systems provided alternative communication options that could be employed if circumstances required coordination or notification of tactical developments. Environmental monitoring instruments were deployed to begin collecting real-time data about atmospheric conditions that would affect ballistic calculations for extreme-range shooting. Wind meters, barometric pressure sensors, and temperature monitoring devices provided measurements that exceeded the precision of standard military meteorological equipment, offering data that could be crucial for shooting solutions that required accuracy measured in inches rather than feet at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. Range calculations and ballistic computations had been prepared in advance using satellite imagery and topographical data that Emma had analyzed during weeks of careful study. But real-time environmental data was essential for final trajectory. Solutions that would account for current atmospheric conditions and their effects on projectile flight characteristics. Her ballistic computers processed environmental inputs and equipment specifications to generate shooting solutions that incorporated variables including air density, wind effects, temperature gradients, and target angle considerations. Navigation systems provided precise coordinates for potential shooting positions that Emma had identified through systematic terrain analysis and had evaluated for concealment, stability, and firing angles that could engage the enemy sniper position. Across Wadi Karim, the positions had been selected to provide optimal ballistic conditions, while minimizing detection probability and offering escape routes that could be employed if tactical circumstances required rapid withdrawal from advanced positions. Tactical planning incorporated timing considerations that required coordination with ongoing reconnaissance activities to avoid interference with official operations while maximizing the probability of success for unauthorized precision shooting attempts. Emma's understanding of military operations and communication procedures allowed her to develop plans that could complement rather than compromise official activities, while maintaining independence and flexibility that were essential. For unconventional approaches to tactical problems. Equipment transport and positioning preparations reflected Emma's understanding that operational employment of her specialized capabilities would require movement to advanced positions under conditions that might include hostile observation and potential enemy countermeasures. Her gear had been organized for efficient transport and rapid deployment, with modular systems that could be reconfigured for different tactical requirements and environmental conditions. Personal preparation had included physical and mental conditioning routines that prepared Emma for the demands of precision shooting under operational stress, including extended periods in uncomfortable positions while maintaining the concentration and fine motor control required for extreme range accuracy. Her preparation routines included breathing exercises and relaxation techniques that were designed to optimize shooting performance under time pressure and psychological stress. Security measures were implemented to prevent detection of preparation activities by personnel who would likely attempt to prevent unauthorized tactical operations if they became aware of Emma's intentions. Administrative routines continued to provide cover for equipment movement and preparation activities, while timing and positioning were carefully planned to avoid observation by colleagues whose duties might bring them into contact with logistics areas during critical preparation phases. Final equipment checks confirmed that all systems were functioning within specifications and ready for operational employment under the environmental conditions that were developing throughout the morning. Emma's preparation had reached the point where technical readiness was optimized and tactical opportunities were emerging, creating circumstances where her unauthorized capabilities might prove decisive for resolving a crisis that had exceeded the capabilities of conventional military approaches. The transition from preparation to operational implementation represented a critical decision point where Emma's private training and specialized equipment would be committed to tactical employment that could not be reversed or concealed once initiated. Her systematic approach to preparation had created optimal conditions for success, but the actual employment of her capabilities would require decisions and actions that extended far beyond her assigned responsibilities and into areas where her authority was questionable and her potential consequences were significant. Emma's movement toward her selected firing position had been timed to coincide with the morning patrol schedule that would minimize encounters with base personnel while ensuring that her absence from normal duties would not be immediately noticed. The route she had chosen avoided main thoroughfares and utilized maintenance paths that were less frequently traveled during operational periods, allowing transport of specialized equipment without drawing attention to activities that would likely generate questions she was not prepared to answer through official channels. The selected position lay approximately 800 meters northwest of forward Operating Base Sentinel, on elevated terrain that provided clear sight lines across Wadi Karim to the enemy sniper location while offering concealment from casual observation and protection from potential counterfire. Emma had identified and evaluated this position during weeks of systematic terrain analysis, testing sight angles and environmental conditions during various times of day and weather patterns to ensure optimal shooting parameters when operational employment became necessary. Establishment of the firing position required careful attention to concealment and stability, considerations that would affect both immediate tactical security and long-range shooting accuracy. Emma's ghillie suit and camouflage materials had been specifically selected and modified for the terrain features and vegetation patterns around her chosen location, providing visual concealment that would be effective against both casual observation and deliberate enemy surveillance activities that might be conducted using optical equipment. The shooting platform she constructed incorporated lessons learned from competitive precision shooting and military sniper training, creating a stable base that would support extended periods in shooting position while maintaining the rigidity required for consistent accuracy at extreme ranges. Sandbags and equipment padding were arranged to provide optimal body position and rifle support, while minimizing pressure points and physical stress that could affect fine motor control during extended observation and shooting activities. Emma's spotting scope was positioned to provide comprehensive surveillance of the target area, while allowing continuous monitoring of environmental conditions that affected ballistic calculations for extreme-range shooting. The scope's advanced optics revealed details about enemy positions and activities that exceeded the capabilities of standard military observation equipment, offering insights into enemy procedures and timing patterns that could be crucial for identifying optimal engagement opportunities. Environmental monitoring equipment provided real-time measurements of atmospheric conditions that were essential for ballistic calculations at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. Wind speeds and directions were tracked continuously using instruments that detected variations measured in fractions of miles per hour, while temperature and barometric pressure sensors provided data that affected air density calculations and projectile stability considerations. The environmental data was more precise than what was available to standard military operations, offering accuracy that could prove decisive for shooting solutions that required precision measured in inches rather than feet. Range verification. Using laser rangefinders confirmed the distance to the enemy position at 1,647 meters, placing the shot at the extreme edge of what Emma's equipment and ammunition could reliably accomplish under current environmental conditions. The range exceeded standard military engagement distances by substantial margins, requiring ballistic calculations that incorporated variables including projectile drop, wind drift, and atmospheric effects that became increasingly significant. As distances increased beyond conventional parameters, ballistic computations processed environmental data and equipment specifications to generate shooting solutions that accounted for all measurable variables affecting projectile trajectory. Over the extreme distance involved, Emma's ballistic computer calculated corrections for air density, wind effects, temperature gradients, and target angle, while incorporating ammunition specifications and rifle characteristics that had been precisely measured and recorded through extensive testing and evaluation procedures. Communications monitoring revealed ongoing activities by Thompson's reconnaissance team, which had established their observation position and begun detailed surveillance of enemy activities across Wadi Karim. Their radio traffic indicated normal enemy behavior patterns without immediate indication of unusual activity or preparation for defensive action. The intelligence provided Emma with current information about enemy positioning and timing that could be crucial for planning engagement windows and tactical coordination. Target identification through advanced optics revealed specific details about enemy personnel and equipment that exceeded the information available through standard reconnaissance methods. Emma's spotting scope provided magnification and image clarity that allowed identification of individual weapons, equipment configurations, and personnel characteristics that could be relevant for target selection and engagement planning. The detailed observation capabilities offered tactical intelligence that complemented official reconnaissance, while providing information that was specifically relevant to precision shooting requirements. Emma's rifle system was carefully zeroed and calibrated for the specific environmental conditions and target parameters that characterized the operational situation. The zeroing process incorporated atmospheric data and range calculations to ensure that the rifle's point of impact would correspond precisely with the intended point of aim at the extreme distance involved. Equipment adjustments were made with precision that exceeded standard military procedures, reflecting the critical nature of accuracy requirements for single-shot success at maximum range. Ammunition selection involved choosing cartridges that had been hand-loaded and tested specifically for ballistic performance under the environmental conditions and distance requirements that characterized the current tactical situation. Each round had been weighed, measured, and verified for consistency that exceeded mass-produced ammunition by margins that could prove crucial when shooting at distances where minor variations in velocity or trajectory could determine success or failure. Physical positioning and shooting preparation required adoption of body positions and rifle supports that would provide maximum stability and accuracy while allowing sustained observation and shooting capability over extended periods. Emma's shooting position incorporated techniques learned from competitive precision shooting and military sniper training, optimizing bone support and muscular relaxation to minimize movement and tremor that could affect accuracy at extreme ranges. Breathing and concentration techniques were employed to optimize physiological and psychological conditions for precision shooting under operational stress. Emma's preparation included controlled breathing patterns and mental focus exercises that were designed to maintain optimal performance despite time pressure and tactical considerations that could affect concentration and fine motor control during critical shooting activities. Wind reading and environmental assessment continued throughout the preparation period, with constant monitoring of atmospheric conditions that could change rapidly and significantly affect ballistic trajectories. At extreme ranges, Emma's ability to interpret subtle environmental indicators and predict atmospheric changes exceeded standard military training, providing capabilities that were essential for timing engagement opportunities when environmental conditions were optimal for extreme range accuracy. Final equipment checks confirmed that all systems were functioning within specifications and ready for operational employment when tactical circumstances provided appropriate engagement opportunities. Emma's rifle, optics, ammunition, and support equipment had been optimized for the specific requirements of extreme range precision shooting under current environmental conditions, creating capabilities that exceeded standard military equipment by substantial margins. Tactical timing considerations incorporated ongoing reconnaissance activities and enemy behavior patterns to identify optimal engagement windows when success probability was maximized while minimizing risks of detection or interference with official operations. Emma's understanding of military procedures and enemy tactics allowed her to develop engagement plans that could complement official activities while maintaining operational security and tactical effectiveness. The preparation phase had achieved technical and tactical readiness for precision shooting operations that exceeded the capabilities of standard military procedures and equipment, creating opportunities for resolving the tactical crisis through unconventional means that had not been considered through official planning processes. Emma's systematic approach to preparation had optimized all controllable variables, while maintaining flexibility for adapting to changing circumstances and emerging opportunities that might develop during operational employment of her specialized capabilities. The radio communication from Sergeant First Class Jake Thompson's reconnaissance team had maintained professional composure, despite circumstances that challenged everything they understood about tactical possibilities and equipment limitations. Thompson's voice carried the controlled tension of someone reporting information that contradicted his own direct observations, describing what appeared to be the immediate aftermath of a precision shooting engagement that should have been impossible. Given the distance, environmental conditions, and known coalition capabilities in the operational area. Phoenix Base, this is Overwatch 1. We have eyes on the target location across Wadi Karim. Thermal signature indicates sudden temperature. Change consistent with personnel down. No movement detected in the enemy position for the past 12 minutes. Requesting confirmation of any friendly precision fires in this sector. Thompson's transmission revealed confusion about the source of what his team was observing, since no official shooting operations had been authorized or coordinated through command channels. Corporal Tyler Brooks had provided additional details through his spotting scope that offered higher magnification and better resolution than standard reconnaissance equipment. His observations confirmed that the enemy sniper position that had dominated approaches to Checkpoint Bravo for over a week had become suddenly inactive, with no evidence of the coordinated enemy activity that had characterized their operations since the tactical crisis had begun. The sophisticated enemy defensive network that had prevented all previous supply attempts appeared to have suffered a critical disruption that could not be explained through conventional tactical analysis. Captain Michael Davis had been monitoring communications from the Tactical Operations Center when Thompson's reports began arriving, and his initial response reflected the skeptical professionalism that characterized his approach to unexpected battlefield developments. Davis understood that tactical situations could change rapidly and unpredictably, but the reports he was receiving described changes that exceeded the capabilities of any coalition forces that were known to be operating in the relevant area. Overwatch 1, Phoenix Base, negative on authorized precision fires. All sniper teams are accounted for, and none report engagement activities in your sector. Confirm your observations and provide additional details about target area status. Davis's response indicated his recognition that something significant had occurred, but also his confusion about how conventional tactical analysis could explain what his reconnaissance team was reporting from their advanced observation position. The tactical displays in the operations center showed no indication of coalition shooting activities that could account for the sudden change in enemy capabilities that Thompson's team was describing. Drone surveillance feeds remained focused on other operational areas. Communications intercepts had revealed no evidence of coalition sniper operations, and equipment tracking systems showed no deployment of precision shooting assets that could engage targets at the ranges involved in the current tactical situation. Staff Sergeant Ashley Carter had been monitoring supply status reports when the reconnaissance communications began indicating unexpected developments in the tactical situation. Her responsibilities for coordinating logistics support had provided her with comprehensive awareness of coalition capabilities and resource allocation, making her particularly qualified to recognize that no official operations could account for what Thompson's team was observing across Wadi Karim. Emma Rodriguez had been absent from her normal duty station for approximately 45 minutes when her colleagues began noticing that routine administrative tasks were not being completed according to normal schedules. Private Sam Wilson had arrived at the supply depot to process ammunition requisitions and found that standard procedures were not proceeding as expected, though nothing indicated emergency or crisis beyond the normal operational tempo that characterized base activities during tactical operations. The correlation between Emma's absence and the tactical developments being reported by reconnaissance teams had not been immediately apparent to personnel who were focused on their respective areas of responsibility. Military operations often involved personnel being temporarily reassigned or engaged in activities that took them away from normal duties, and Emma's reputation for reliability and competence had created assumptions that her absence was related to legitimate administrative requirements rather than unauthorized activities. Wilson's attempts to locate Emma for administrative coordination had initially followed routine procedures for contacting personnel who were temporarily unavailable, but the extended nature of her absence had gradually created concerns about operational continuity and the completion of time-sensitive logistics tasks. His inquiries with other logistics personnel had revealed that Emma's location and activities were unknown, which was unusual for someone whose responsibilities required constant availability for coordination and decision-making. The Tactical Operations Center had become increasingly active as reports from Thompson's reconnaissance team continued to describe developments that challenged conventional understanding of the tactical situation. Additional reconnaissance assets were being deployed to confirm and expand upon initial observations, while intelligence analysts began reviewing all available information about coalition capabilities and enemy activities that might explain the sudden change in tactical dynamics. Captain Davis had initiated procedures for comprehensive review of all coalition activities in the operational area, seeking explanations for tactical developments that exceeded known capabilities and contradicted established intelligence assessments about enemy strength and positioning. His systematic approach to problem-solving demanded verification of information through multiple sources and careful analysis of all possibilities before reaching conclusions about unprecedented developments. Communications with higher headquarters had been established to report tactical changes and request guidance about appropriate responses to developments that appeared to offer opportunities for resolving the supply crisis at Checkpoint Bravo. Davis's reports had emphasized the uncertainty about causes while describing potential opportunities that might emerge if enemy capabilities had been significantly degraded through unknown means. Emma's eventual return to forward Operating Base Sentinel had been accomplished through the same inconspicuous routes that had characterized her departure, with specialized equipment secured and her appearance consistent with someone who had been engaged in routine administrative activities away from normal duty locations. Her timing had been calculated to minimize questions about her absence while allowing her to resume normal responsibilities before her unavailability created operational complications. The supply depot had returned to normal operational tempo. Upon Emma's arrival, with routine administrative tasks resuming according to established schedules and procedures, her interactions with colleagues who had been seeking her during her absence had been professionally appropriate and had provided reasonable explanations for her temporary unavailability without revealing activities that extended beyond her assigned responsibilities. Private Wilson's administrative requirements had been processed efficiently upon Emma's return, with her explanations about temporary reassignment to inventory activities in remote storage areas, providing reasonable justification for her extended absence from normal duty locations. The efficiency with which she resumed normal operations had reinforced assumptions about her reliability and professional competence, while deflecting attention from activities that had occurred during her unavailability. The Tactical Operations Center had continued receiving reports from reconnaissance teams that confirmed the sudden cessation of enemy activities and the apparent neutralization of sniper capabilities that had prevented all previous attempts to establish supply lines to Checkpoint Bravo. Thompson's team had reported no evidence of enemy countermeasures or attempts to restore tactical capabilities, suggesting that the disruption of their operations might be permanent rather than temporary. Intelligence analysis had begun focusing on potential explanations for enemy tactical failures that could account for the sudden change in their capabilities without involving known coalition operations. Various hypotheses were being evaluated, including equipment failures, personnel casualties, and tactical repositioning that might have created opportunities for coalition forces to exploit without immediate recognition of the source of their advantage. Emma's administrative activities had resumed with characteristic efficiency and attention to detail, but her colleagues had begun noticing subtle changes in her demeanor that suggested Awareness of tactical developments that exceeded what logistics personnel would normally possess. Her questions about reconnaissance operations and tactical assessments had become more frequent and more sophisticated, indicating familiarity with operational details that exceeded her assigned responsibilities. The correlation between Emma's temporary absence and the tactical developments being reported by reconnaissance teams had remained unrecognized by personnel who were focused on immediate operational requirements and lacked comprehensive awareness of timing relationships and personnel movements. Military operations involved complex coordination of multiple activities, making it difficult to identify connections between events that occurred simultaneously but were not obviously related. Captain Davis had begun planning immediate exploitation of tactical opportunities that appeared to be emerging from the unexpected neutralization of enemy capabilities that had prevented all previous supply operations. Convoy preparation activities were being initiated while reconnaissance teams continued monitoring the tactical situation to ensure that apparent opportunities were genuine rather than deceptive enemy tactics designed to create vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.